Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. How are you today? May you always be healthy and full of blessings. Before starting, let's start by reciting a prayer. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala ali Sayyidina Muhammad. May this prayer be a way for us to get intercession from the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam on the Day of Judgment. Amin. Hello Muslim friends, meet again with the Islamic Lantern channel. Before we continue, it would be nice if we support this channel by clicking the subscribe, like, comment, and share buttons. Come on, let's listen to the story. In a small village surrounded by green hills in Italy, there is an old monastery that has stood strong for centuries. This monastery is a place where tranquility is felt so deeply, with the sound of church bells ringing softly every morning, breaking the silence of the village. The nuns who live there lead a simple life, far from the hustle and bustle of the outside world, with a routine filled with prayer, meditation, and service to the small community around them. Among the nuns there is Maria Elena, a 21-year-old young woman who possesses a natural beauty that often leaves people mesmerized. Her long black hair is always covered by a nun's veil, but her expressive eyes radiate a zest for life and deep curiosity. Maria is known for her intelligence. She is often the first person to ask questions or give her opinion during small discussions in the monastery. But behind her friendly smile, Maria felt something strange, like there was an emptiness in her life that she could not understand. When the other nuns were busy with their daily routines, Maria was often alone in the small garden of the monastery, gazing at the hills that surrounded the village. She often asked herself, "Is this all there is to life? Is true peace really like this?" But these questions she never voiced to anyone. One bright morning, Maria's task was to clean the old library in the monastery. The library was rarely visited. The wooden shelves were filled with old books covered in dust, and the atmosphere inside always felt quiet. While sweeping the floor, Maria accidentally dropped a pile of old books lying in the corner. When she bent down to pick them up, her eyes fell on a book tucked between a pile of old documents. The book looked different. Its cover was made of a material that had begun to wear away with time. Its color had faded, and the corners looked fragile. The writing on the cover was barely legible, but Maria could make out some of the letters written in faded gold ink. A true life script. Maria's heart began to beat cautiously. He cleaned the dust covering the book and opened it. The pages felt rough at the tip of his fingers, and the old scent that filled the air was made with ancient letters, something that Maria had never seen before. She read the first few paragraphs, but soon realized that the language used in the script was different. What interested Maria were some symbols and phrases that looked like hidden messages. Maria sat on the library floor, lost in curiosity. Every page she opened revealed something new, something that seemed to speak directly to her soul. There were words about the oneness of God, about a meaningful life, and about a messenger who would bring the message of truth. Even though she did not fully understand the contents of the manuscript, Maria felt that this book held an incredibly important secret. That day became the starting point for a change in Maria's life. She took the book to her small room in the monastery and read it silently every night after prayer. The more she read, the more she felt that the manuscript was different from what she had been taught. On the other hand, Maria was aware that keeping the book was risky. If one of the other nuns found it, the book might be taken from her, and she would not have the chance to finish reading it. But Maria's curiosity was greater, stronger than her fear. Every night she wrote down the parts she thought were important, trying to understand the meaning behind the words. She often heard puzzles in her heart. Maria began to feel that her life might not be as she had previously thought. She began to question the beliefs she had learned and dig deeper into what she truly believed. Meanwhile, the monastery continued its life as usual for the other nuns, unaware that in Maria's small room, an extraordinary spiritual journey was beginning. Curiosity drove Maria to reopen the ancient manuscript that she had found. Every time she touched its fragile pages, she felt something difficult to explain, as if the manuscript was calling her to understand. The secrets contained in the ancient writings not only told history, but also revealed concepts so profound that, for Maria, they felt new and confusing at the same time. In the middle of the night, when the atmosphere of the monastery is completely silent, Maria sits in the corner of her room with a small candle, illuminating the pages of the manuscript. She reads it attentively, word by word, phrase by phrase. She finds that the contents of the manuscript are very different from the teachings she has studied so far. The concept of the oneness of God, monotheism, is repeated many times within it. God is one. He has no partners. That is the essence. From the many writings in the manuscript, Maria remains silent for a long time, pondering the words she has read. In her old belief, she had been taught about the Trinity, but what is written in this manuscript contradicts that. She feels as though she has found something that has been missing for a long time, something she needs to fill the emptiness in her heart. Yet she also knows that this thought is dangerous if it becomes known to others in the monastery. Every night, Maria continues her search. Weeks pass, and she begins to note down important points from the manuscript. She makes small copies of some parts that she finds particularly valuable, writing the words down in her notebook with trembling hands. Among the many things she finds, there is one part that truly stuns her: the prophecy about a final prophet who would bring the teachings of truth to mankind. The name of that prophet is Muhammad. Maria reads the passage over and over again, making sure she has not misunderstood. This is the first time she has heard the name in a different context from what she is used to in her teachings. She had only known Muhammad as a figure from another religion, but in this manuscript, the name Muhammad is mentioned with full respect and majesty. Maria tries to understand more deeply who Muhammad is. She begins to look for other references in the monastery library, even though she knows it is a risky action. Some of the history books she read mentioned Islam as the religion brought by Muhammad, but his descriptions were always limited and full of bias. However, the ancient manuscripts she studied conveyed something very different, a much more profound message, uniquely meaningful and full of depth. Maria's curiosity grew bigger. She began to wonder how a manuscript that was so old could contain teachings that felt so relevant and profound. She realized there was a big difference between what she had known so far and what was actually written in the manuscript. Every silent night in the convent, Maria became more and more immersed in her search. She began to see the world differently, questioning many things she had always considered true. But she was also afraid. What would happen if other people found out what she was doing? What if the other nuns discovered the notes in the manuscript she had hidden under her bed? Despite her fears, Maria couldn't stop. Something inside her drove her to continue searching for something bigger than herself. She began to feel that her life might have been destined to find this manuscript and study it night after night. Maria started to see herself not only as a nun, but as a seeker of truth. She knew her journey was not over, but she also felt that she had taken the first step towards something extraordinary. Maria began to realize that the ancient manuscript she had found held something different. Every night she felt closer to it, convinced that its contents offered truths she had never encountered in the teachings she had studied since childhood. This realization confused her, but it also ignited a fire of enthusiasm to learn more. Amid her doubts and confusion, Maria decided to deepen her search. She began to read more about the Prophet Muhammad and the teachings of Islam. Secretly, she ordered reference books about Islam and the Quran, using anonymous channels unknown to anyone in the monastery. She handled this process with great care to avoid arousing suspicion. When the books arrived, Maria hid them in a secret place in her room. At night, she read each page carefully, often staying up late into the night, accompanied only by candlelight. The Quran became her main focus. She read the translation and its interpretation, trying to understand each verse with an open heart. The more Maria studied the teachings of Islam, the more impressed she became. She read about the Prophet Muhammad as a messenger who taught peace, justice, and compassion. The stories of the Prophet's struggle to spread the truth, despite facing various challenges, moved Maria deeply. This journey moved her, not only about religion, but also about the truth that applies to all of humanity. Maria found that many concepts in Islam answered questions that had been troubling her mind for a long time. Tawheed, or the oneness of God, felt so logical and pure to her. She began to see that many things she had previously believed were contrary to what was written in the Quran. However, this journey was not easy. The monastery where Maria lived was a very closed world. Every activity was strictly regulated, and every member was expected to obey traditions without question. Maria had to do her research very carefully. The books she read were always carefully hidden after she finished reading them. Even her notes were disguised so as not to arouse suspicion. There were nights when Maria felt afraid. What if she was found out? What would happen to her? But that fear was always defeated by her strong desire to seek the truth. She felt that this was a journey destined for her. As Maria began to realize that Islam was not just a religion, but a perfect way of life, its teachings about the relationships between humans and God, with other humans, and with nature felt so comprehensive and harmonious. Every time she read the Quran, she felt a peace she had never experienced before. Still, Maria knew that the next step would be very difficult. If she decided to embrace Islam, she would have to face the world of the monastery she had known as her home. She would have to confront her friends and mentors who might not accept her choice easily. Maria stood on the threshold of a major decision in her life. On one hand, he has a new belief that gives him peace and answers to his search. On the other hand, he has to face the consequences of that decision. But in his heart, he knows that he cannot ignore the truth he has discovered. Maria's journey has just begun, and she is ready to go further, even though the path she will take is full of challenges. After months of struggling with her thoughts and feelings, Maria finally makes a decision that will change her life. On a cold morning, she leaves the monastery to go to the nearest city. With a pounding heart, Maria follows the address she found secretly through online references. A small mosque hidden in the middle of the hustle and bustle of the city. When Maria arrives, she is greeted by a friendly and authoritative imam. The imam listens attentively as Maria recounts her spiritual journey, from finding the Kun manuscript to secretly studying the Quran. The imam looks at Maria with eyes full of empathy and gives her comforting words. Allah has guided you to this path, the imam says in a soft voice. Not everyone is given an opportunity like this. You are one of those chosen. With the imam's guidance, Maria recites the 2 sentences with a trembling voice but full of confidence. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. Tears flow down her cheeks. At that moment, Maria feels her heart filled with a peace she has never experienced before. The burden of doubt and confusion that had been haunting her disappears instantly. But Maria knows this is just the beginning of her long journey. After receiving basic teachings about Islam from the imam, Maria returns to the monastery with a steadfast heart. This time she returns not as an ordinary nun, but as a Muslim woman with a great mission. Maria realizes that the challenges ahead will be very difficult. She will have to live amidst a community that does not understand or may even oppose her decision. But Maria feels she cannot leave the other nuns without sharing the light of truth she has found. In the convent, Maria continues her routine as usual, carrying out her duties responsibly, but now with a new spirit and purpose. In silence, she begins to pay more attention to her behavior and character. Each of the nuns Maria looked for the right moments to approach them, not with a pushy attitude, but with tenderness and affection. One day, Maria started with her closest friend in the convent, a nun named Sophia. While they were having a casual conversation in the garden, Maria carefully began discussing the concept of Tawheed, which she had learned from the Nuns manuscript. Have you ever thought about the essence of God, that He is one, who does not beget and is not begotten? Sophia paused for a moment. I think sometimes there is something that I feel I fully know, yet I must deepen that knowledge until I find the one who is more like me, she said. Maria patiently explained the contents of each important point, including the prophecy about the Prophet Muhammad. Sophia listened attentively. Although at first hesitant, she began to feel interested in the teachings that Maria conveyed. Slowly, Maria began to approach other nuns in a similar way. She never forced them, but always built up conversations in a gentle way, respecting their beliefs. Within a few months, some nuns showed the same interest. Maria also spent her nights praying to Allah to be given strength and wisdom to continue her preaching. She was aware that this task was not an easy one, but she believed that the truth would always find its way. Small changes began to appear in the monastery. Some of the nuns began to ask more about Islam, even requesting Maria to teach them the verses of the Quran that she had memorized. Maria felt that Allah had opened their hearts little by little. However, not everyone in the monastery welcomed this change. Some of the older nuns began to feel suspicious of Maria. They noticed that the atmosphere in the convent was slowly changing, and Maria seemed to be at the center of it. Small conflicts began to arise, but Maria remained patient and steadfast in her faith. Maria knew that her journey was still long, but she felt confident that God was always with her, giving her the strength to face every challenge that came her way. This preaching is not only about conveying Islamic teachings, but also about showing the love and kindness taught by this religion. She believed that with gentleness and affection, even the hardest heart could be softened. Maria began her preaching in a wise and gentle way. She understood that change could not be forced, especially in a monastery environment that was so thick with traditions and beliefs that had been rooted for hundreds of years. She chose to approach her fellow nuns with light conversation. In that conversation, Maria did not immediately teach Islam. Instead, she began to share personal reflections about the human condition. Have you ever felt that there is something bigger that we miss in this life? Maria asked one night when they were sitting together in the garden. The nuns who were reading paused and looked at Maria. Drawing closer to God, Maria continued, is not only a form of routine prayer, but a deep understanding of who God is in this life. The nun's attention was drawn by her words. Maria knew her approach had to be patient and loving. Talking privately with a nun who had an open mind went smoothly. At first, many rejected and doubted Maria. Some nuns even thought she had gone astray. They looked at Maria with suspicion, and some tried to avoid her. Maria remained steadfast, not responding to rejection with anger, but with kindness. There was a moment when Maria was cornered by some of the more conservative nuns. "What are you looking for, Maria? Are you dissatisfied with life in this convent?" asked one of them in a firm tone. Maria answered calmly, "I am not looking for anything but truth. If what I found is a mistake, I want us all to discuss it together." Despite their doubts, there was one figure among the nuns who was highly respected. Sister Teresa, a role model who had been in the monastery for decades. Teresa was known to be wise and a source of guidance for all. When Maria approached Teresa, she did so very carefully. Maria often spent time with Teresa, helping with the convent's tasks and listening to her stories. One day, while they were sorting through old documents in the library, Maria gently said, "Sister Teresa, I would like to share something I have discovered. I would like to hear your opinion." Maria showed Teresa some notes from ancient manuscripts she had found, and they began to discuss them deeply. The concept of Tawhid. Teresa, who was initially skeptical, listened attentively. "I have never thought about this before," Teresa finally said, "but there was something in these words that touched my heart." In the following nights, Teresa secretly began to read Maria's notes and study the Quran. In a few weeks, changes began to be seen in Teresa. She began to ask Maria more questions and even started to consider things that she had previously thought were impossible. Until one night, Teresa decided to take a big step. In front of Maria, with tears flowing down her face, on her cheeks, she said the 2 sentences of the Shahada. "I feel at peace," she said. "This is the answer I have been looking for." Teresa's decision became a major turning point in the convent. As a respected figure, Teresa's change had a significant influence on the other nuns. They began to see that what Maria said was not a threat, but something to consider. Teresa began to accompany Maria in her preaching in a gentle way. Together, they spoke to the other nuns, answered their questions, and helped them overcome the doubts that arose. The convent slowly began to change. Although not all the nuns accepted Islam, many began to open their hearts and study teachings they had previously considered foreign. The atmosphere, which was initially filled with suspicion, began to change with discussions and a deep search for truth. However, Maria and Teresa knew that this journey was still long. They faced challenges from outside parties. Even from church authorities who began to notice the changes in the monastery. They believe that with patience and prayer, God will guide them and open the hearts of more people to accept the truth. From one person to two, from one to three, the month of milking began, and quickly in the monastery, the nuns who had previously only listened with curiosity now participated in in-depth discussions. They began to open their hearts to understanding Islam, not only through Maria's explanations, but also through their personal experiences when reading the Quran and studying it. Maria's teachings still maintain her preaching with great gentleness. She does not force but gives space for each nun to think and make her own decisions. She says, "I am not asking you to believe me. I just want you to find the truth for yourself." In a few months, almost half of the residents of the monastery had recited the 2 sentences of the Shahada every time someone accepted Islam. Maria felt a happiness that was difficult to express. For her, this was not only about belief, but also about giving new hope to those who had once felt doubtful. The monastery, which had once been a symbol of the old faith, had now become a place where the light of Islam shines brightly. The nuns who had converted to Islam began to live a different life. They still maintained their daily duties in the monastery, but now they accompanied them with prayers, reading the Quran, and deepening their understanding of Islamic teachings. One of the most touching moments occurred when the call to prayer was first heard. In the monastery, a nun who had just converted to Islam decided to learn to call the prayer. His voice echoed throughout the monastery room, bringing a peaceful atmosphere that had never been felt before. News about this monastery did not just stop within its walls. In a short time, the news spread throughout the village and even to big cities. In Italy, people are talking about the big changes that have taken place in the monastery. Many are surprised and even angry, especially among the church and conservative population. However, many are inspired. People who previously doubted their own religion are starting to hear about Islamic teachings from a new perspective. Some of them even came to the convent, not to criticize, but to find out more about the truth that had changed the lives of the nuns. Amidst the great attention the convent received, Maria continued to preach in the same way as when she first started, sincerely, patiently, and without compulsion. She realized that the changes she experienced were not only about herself, but also about bringing the light of Islam to places she had never imagined before. When people came to ask questions, Maria always invited them to dialogue with an open heart. She never forced her beliefs, but always offered an invitation to reflect on the truth. "It is like the sun," he said to a villager who came with great curiosity. "We cannot force people to see it, but when they open their eyes, the light cannot be ignored." But the journey was not easy. The more people accepted Islam, the greater the challenges Maria faced. The church authorities began to notice the changes in the monastery and considered it a threat. Priests from nearby villages began to come to the monastery to talk to Maria and the other nuns, trying to bring them back to their old beliefs. Maria greeted them with respect, but she remained firm in her position. In every discussion, she always spoke with wisdom from the Quran and the Kun manuscripts that she had found. "I do not oppose your beliefs," she said to him once, a priest who came with a confrontational tone. "I just found something closer to the truth, and I hope we can discuss it together." Maria knew that her struggle was long, but she believed that every soul who accepts Islam is proof that the truth cannot be blocked. The monastery is now a center of spiritual movement, which brought great changes not only to its inhabitants, but also to the people around her. With every step she took, Maria felt increasingly certain that the journey she was taking was part of God's plan. She believed that, as long as she took steps with sincere intentions and a heart full of sincerity, God would always guide her and give her strength to face every challenge that came. Maria Elena, who was once just a nun, a young woman whose life was full of routine in a small monastery in Italy, has now transformed into a figure who inspires thousands of people. Initially, she was just a 21-year-old woman who felt that something was missing in her life. She felt that the answer to her anxiety had not been found until finally she met an ancient manuscript, which changed everything. But Maria's journey was not without obstacles. She had to face doubts from within herself, pressure from those around her, and even criticism from church authorities. But Maria did not give up. She chose to stand firm, letting the light of truth that she found shine in her heart and spread it to those around her. Mary's exemplary character lies in her courage to seek the truth, even though it meant leaving the comfort and beliefs she had held since childhood. She not only accepted Islam for herself, but also brought the message to others in a loving way. And with the gentleness in her patience, she was able to change the views of many people, even in the most unexpected places. Maria is now a symbol that truth knows no boundaries. The light of Islam can touch the hearts of anyone, regardless of their professional background or previous beliefs. The monastery, which was once known only as a place for the nuns' worship, is now a center of spiritual change that inspires many people. For Maria, this journey is not the end, but the beginning of a greater mission. She is convinced that every step, what she took, was part of God's plan, and she believed that the truth would always find its way. Now, Maria is not only living her life as a Muslim woman, but also as a pioneer who brings the message of Islam to places that have never been touched before. Maria's story teaches us all that the search for the truth may be long, but with the courage, sincerity, and patience of the journey, we may face many hands. However, with firm determination, there is nothing that is impossible for those who are determined to follow the right path. Not only did she change herself, but also the people around her. Her courage and sincerity touched the hearts of the other nuns, the villagers, and even people outside the small circle of her convent. May this story be a reminder to us all to never stop seeking the truth. When God gives us our guidance, we must have the strength to accept it and live it. The light of Islam is not only for ourselves, but also to be shared with the world. Let us pray that we will always be given the strength to walk the right path, inspiring others and bringing the light of Islam wherever we go, because the truth is always finding its way, like flowing water seeping into the deepest places and touching the heart the hardest. Hopefully, we all learn a lesson from this story and make it a motivation to continue searching, continue learning, and continue to draw closer to Allah, because in the end, the journey to seek the truth is the path to true happiness. This is the end of our video. If you enjoy Islamic content like this, don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next video.